your host, Eflarinu, and today I have the pleasure to connect with Marc Lussy, who is in Switzerland. I remember Marc from the first days that I got into fintech, and now it's been a long time, 7, 8 years or more maybe. First of all, welcome, Marc.
Thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to meet you. Remember, we met first, and I enjoyed every time to have a conversation with you.
Yes, and it was the early days where there was a few of us, so everybody knew each other, and
exactly.
Well, I mean, you wear a lot of hats. I'll start with the main ones. You are a partner at a WealthTech IBO, investment by objectives. I think I've written about IBO several times in the early days on Daily Fintech, because really you were pioneers in terms of thinking about transparency and performance in the investment world. Maybe we'll have the opportunity to speak, but you're also a senior advisor at the top Fintech accelerator here in Switzerland and now global, which was F10 and now it's called Tenity, right?
Tenity.
Yeah, and you're also a consultant, connecting dots. You'll have the opportunity to explain to us. So tell us a bit about this connecting dots theme that I feel is very much core to you, and maybe weave into that how you have this very unique presence. I like to think of it as a triangle connecting Switzerland, Brazil, and China.
Yeah. Look, I mean, it's just like the thing is, I always did what I liked. I have been doing what I like to do, right? So I always was like, I like economics. So I always knew I wanted to work in the financial sector. And then I started as a trader, moved to portfolio management, and then to IT and fintech. So it just happened. I did what I liked. And then I always liked cultures. I had to do with like new cultures. Like one of my first jobs was with a Japanese bank. So I just got into that, and I stayed connected with all these fields always because I liked it. It was not a job, I liked it. So I stayed connected. So that meant I built a lot of dots of knowledge, and that just happened. And then in addition, I really appreciate to talk to people. I like people. I honestly like people. I think everybody gives me value, delivers me value, and I like to interact with people. And those are other dots. So it happened. I knew a lot of people. I gained a lot of knowledge. And then I just figured out that is something quite unique. And then since I also led projects and I think quite good with soft factors, I also knew, how to connect these dots, because you need to know how and what is needed when and so on and so forth. And so it just happened automatically. And then only then I started thinking about it, why, because maybe I have to explain it to people why, because I found out people do not really understand what I do. And then I started to think about it, even write about it and explain a bit more. But in the end, it's just like have a lot of dots, people and knowledge. And I have the soft skills to connect them across cultures, across banking and IT technology, and across people, and then I do what I like, and that's why I do it, and it's really amazing because things just happen. I would say it's like surfing, right? So it's just when you surf, the wave is coming and you just take the wave, and you don't think should I take it or not. You just go, and it's just fun, and I think that is what it's all about. So for me it's a lot of fun. I would not at all call it work. And I connect people, and people appreciate it, and are happy, and and I am happy, and that's what it's all about, I think.
Yeah, and you, I mean, before COVID, you were traveling a lot in these regions, both in China and Brazil. So let's talk about these three fintech ecosystems, which obviously are different, and give us a sense, if possible, of what distinguishes them at the level that you feel is appropriate from the rest of the world. So here we are, we kind of cover the globe, Latin America, Europe, and Asia.
Yeah. So maybe I start with Switzerland, because then it's good to move on from there. I think what is very unique for Switzerland, I've been talking about that a lot, ask a lot, what is unique about Switzerland? And I just would say what is very unique for Switzerland, but others don't have, it's a very, very small ecosystem in the sense, a lot of people are in a small space, right? And I would call it a sandbox, right? It's a sandbox, everything works. If somebody tells you, like government or whomever, it will take 2 weeks, it will take 2 weeks, right? And then it's easy to meet all the people from the financial sector, the banks, the IT side, and also government very, very easily. Typically you can have like 10 meetings in a day and going up and down Bahnhofstrasse, government is just around the corner. So it's easy to meet those people. We have events, you can meet CEOs of banks, and you even can meet without a problem. We have a chance to meet with our top level government counselor and so on and so forth, right? So that is very unique, right? So everything is it's at hand. It just can grab it and it works. So then going to China, there it's very different, right? It's a big country. Or maybe coming quickly back to Switzerland, what is also, I think, different here is that the legislator and the regulations, they're quite fintech friendly. So really, our regulator, talking of the fintech license and so on and so forth, our government tried to really help on the fintech side, right? Then let's go to China. There, meeting people, having meetings, there it's the pure opposite. It's very, very hard, right? So it's if you want to take a picture with Wally Maurer here in Switzerland, you will get it, no problem. Try to get a picture with Xi Jinping or somebody else, top level, even a governor of like a province, forget it. So you will not have access, right? So there it's really, you do not get in without having the right connection, the support from the Chinese side. So if you're not introduced, there's no way. Then coming back to the regulation there, and you might be surprised because many people might be surprised when I say that now, China is extremely regulation friendly in the sense that very, very little regulation for fintechs, right? And again, you might be surprised, but let's go back. Let's think of the peer-to-peer lending.
Yeah.
And let's also think of the beginnings of Ant Financial, Alibaba, and WeChat. So they had no regulation whatsoever, right? And the problem was, and that's also a difference in the ecosystem, is that there was no financial inclusion. So for an SME or for a private person, it was not possible to get a loan, to get a credit, right? And like this, an economy cannot work, and the banks were not able to provide it.
Sure.
Right? So therefore, they could start with zero regulation, and that's how they could get big, like Ant Financial, Alibaba, and Tencent, WeChat, right? So that's the big difference.
But
and
they
also
got
that
the
being
regulatory hammer later, right?
Exactly. That's a whole.
Yeah.
And they did it twice, right? So they did with peer-to-peer lending. So they popped out. There was the biggest peer-to-peer lending market, and then the regulator came in, and they came in too late. Right.
It came
and
in
that's
too
what
late.
they learned.
There was a disaster already, right?
Exactly. And there they learned that, therefore they reacted that way. People, we don't want to go too far because that's not the main topic here, but people here think it's all just to eliminate Jack Ma. That was hardly the case, because Ant Financial is a backbone of the financial of the Chinese economy, right? So they cannot kill that, they won't kill that, but it was a huge risk, right? Because they were especially issuing loans and so on and so forth like crazy. So they learned from that, because they said, okay, if you wait again that long and digitization moves really, really fast, then it's too late. So that's the reason why they came in that sharply. But in general, it's a bit the approach of the Chinese regulator. Let it run. And I like that approach. And then if it goes wild, because we see that here in Switzerland, as a fintech, to get the fintech license, it's already very hard, right? And basically, as a fintech startup, typically you don't disrupt the banks, right? Because if you want to build a bank as a fintech startup, I mean, you will not get there. It will cost you so much money and time, right? So therefore, in China again, and financial and with Tencent, they really could disrupt, and that's maybe also the difference of all the ecosystems you have, because they're the big companies in China are Tencent and financial, and they're compared to banks in all over the world, they are very dynamic and innovative. So typically, the fintech ecosystem in China connects with them, right? So we, especially WeChat, Tencent, they provide a platform where you can already connect to the ecosystem. So that is very unique. First of all, the big techs, they are very innovative, and they enable the whole fintech sector, because all those smaller fintech companies can connect. So that's maybe the biggest difference. And then compared to Switzerland, of course, Switzerland is a B2B market or B2B2C market, and of course China is a B2C market. So that's the thing.
And what
and
about
lastly go
to Brazil? Let's go to Brazil.
Exactly. And Brazil, talking now about regulation. So I mean, or let's talk about meeting people, right? So other than in China, it's basically easy to meet people. So people are really open, but it's very, very inefficient, right? So it's I mean, just, you know, having 3 meetings in a day in Sao Paulo, that's already good, right?
Yep.
So that's the thing. It's very inefficient. People might be even late, but it's just, you know, all the traffic and everything, organization. It's really hard. And then for a long time, the regulator, I mean, in Brazil, you have a lot of regulations, right? So it's a lot of laws, a lot of regulation. And the regulator also was not very clear. So he was often like, yeah, well, it's not forbidden, but it's also not allowed. And it's really hard to work like that as a fintech. And now they changed, and they really start pushing it more. So it's good news. And maybe also then the big difference there to other countries is that in Brazil, 5 banks own 80% of the market.
A bit like the UK, right?
Yes, exactly. But I think other than the UK, they, for some reasons, they're really strong, and there would be so much space for disruption. You know, for instance, you know, if you look at the credit spreads, you know, to what they pay to get money, and what they pay for what they ask in interest rate for loan, that's like craziness, right? They have a huge margin, honestly, a huge margin. And basically there would be a lot of space for disruption, but it's really hard to get in. And that, though, is where now the regulator also starts pushing. So the Brazilian regulator would be interested, or is interested to you know, strengthen fintech startups, and a little bit like weaken or make the big banks less dominant, right?
To make
and
the
of course
market
also
more competitive. They want to make the market more
Absolutely.
competitive. And
Absolutely.
so I was not aware of this huge spread advantage that the incumbents have in Brazil. So from the disruptors that we know in Brazil, starting from Nubank, Mercado Libre, and those guys, are they able to start grabbing a share of the lending market or not yet?
Not yet that much. So there's not that. There of course would be need, but that's not happening so much. So but it's huge, because I mean, once more, I mean, like you mentioned Nubank. I mean, it's the biggest, the highest, the digital bank with the highest value, right? So it's worldwide, right? So therefore, I mean, and it moved quickly. So as soon as if they have the client, or they have the clients, so that would be that. I think that will be a step to come, right? Also, it can be very interesting. It's really interesting to see, because now also some time ago, Brazil also launched the CBDC. And with the CBDC, you know, I mean, who will be the issuer of the CBDC, right? So with China, it will be the big banks, not Ant Financial and such. Will that work? Will that go with the digital banks? And then if you can control it easier, right? So yeah, you can track it easier with the CBDCs. So maybe that would be then the next the kickoff, right, for providing more loans to the economy, because I think that helped China a lot, because an economy needs loans, and that is really hard and expensive in Brazil, and that would bring the help to the economy, which in Brazil, which is needed a lot, I think.
The other big success in Brazil that I read about is their real-time payment system, PIX,
Yes.
that apparently has had already huge success in the market. And I don't know how that will coexist with the CBDC. Obviously, it's early days to have an idea, but the PIX system seems to be a big success, like UPI in India. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Absolutely. So it was basically everybody was surprised that it worked so well, because that was driven and made by government, right? And typically in Brazil, government is is usually very
Not
slow
respected.
and right, exactly, yeah, exactly. So that everybody was surprised, and there we have like parallels with China, because there was back in 2016, right? From like within 1 year, everything went from cash only, and in China even more. They didn't use really credit cards, from cash only to online payment, like immediately within 1 year. 2 years, it totally changed. Same story, just a little bit later with this PIX, exactly the same story. So basically, I mean, I did not really go to like small villages somewhere in the north, but like in Sao Paulo, everybody pays with this online solution, right? And here it comes, and that's, you mentioned CBDC. That is what will happen, or is happening in China, and it will exactly happen in Brazil. So in China, of course, it will be Ant Financial, Alipay, and WeChat, where people will pay with. You know, it's the same story. You just use another button, and that was already communicated by the Brazilian government. Of course, they will use PIX for payment with CBDC. And now the question is, who will issue it? Will they issue it on PIX, or will it be done through banks as it is done in China? That is not yet clear.
Yeah. Very interesting. So can we talk now a bit about the collaborations between these three ecosystems, ones that exist and maybe potential ones that one can imagine? So let's start off the existing ones between the different pairs. Let's start with Switzerland and China, or Asia, if you want.
Yes, I mean, let's maybe go to Asia, Switzerland, Asia, because I mean, China is a very, very challenging market, an interesting market too. But let's take Asia. There's typically Singapore, and there we do have really fintechs collaborating, going to Singapore. I mean, one is a great one would be that platform, which is providing an easy way to build to issue AMCs, actively managed certificates. It's Vester. So they have an office in Singapore, because these AMCs, there's really a high demand for AMCs in the Asian market, mainly in Singapore and around. So that is a big success story. And then within China, I mean, there are some cases, but typically so far of what I know of, like startup area, typically those were startups with Chinese roots, you know, from Switzerland, but basically Chinese, which started building it from Switzerland. And that would be, there you could see the success story and case, right? So Swissness is really huge in China, right? And not only because it's like a quality brand, but it's really a very stable financial sector. And Switzerland was one of the first country, you know, starting to work with China. I mean, with the Mao China, right, back then. And so therefore that Swissness is extremely helpful. But what is clear, if you want to go, so far I don't know of really typically Swiss startups, because if you want to go to China, you need Chinese partners. You will need Chinese partners, and you also on the Swiss side, you will need at least an understanding of China, but you need Chinese on site. in which you can trust. So that is just something which needs to be being built, and that's what I work on. So I could, over the past several years, I think I could build a lot of trust in some, you know, Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen, Guangdong, and so on and so forth. So that's my big driver and aim to really push that. But for now, it's Singapore and Hong Kong. Hong Kong also see they're pushing a lot. They want to get fintech startups to Hong Kong. They just have another wave, and they I mean, they want to push again. I feel a strong interest, increasing interest from Hong Kong.
But during your years, especially at F10, you have seen Chinese, as in the founders were Chinese, starting companies here in Switzerland, but really with the aim that they would go and do business in China. Is that correct?
Exactly. And that's a super case, right? I mean, there's of course a case for Swiss companies, startups to go to China, but also for Chinese and equally for Brazilians to come to Switzerland, right? Because the brand is very, very helpful, having the Swiss brand going to China, being Chinese. And as I said before, it's a sandbox. Everything works, but our quality standards are high, right? So it's a sandbox. It's like it's very clear rules. It's hard to achieve those rules, but you know what the rules are, right? So it makes a lot of sense, you know, to come here, to test it here. If Swiss people like it, if the quality is good enough, so for Swiss people, especially in the area of wealth management, then it's a good path then to go to China.
Yeah. I've also seen in the digital asset crypto valley, in the broad sense, crypto valley sense, because obviously that's also a very international ecosystem, and seeing but Brazilian companies too at F10. So tell me more about Brazil and Switzerland. And does F10, I can't even say the new name, have a presence in Brazil?
It took me some time to learn it. Yeah.
Do
sorry, what was the
you have a presence in Brazil?
No, not yet. So actually, we even we once were really close to. I mean, we elaborated and we planned to do hackathon in Sao Paulo, and we saw some quite good interest. And then for, you know, some budget reason and such, then we didn't do it. But it certainly would be, I mean, either Brazil or Mexico, maybe Colombia would be an interesting market. Though what also could be interesting is to go to Miami, because basically Miami is really the hotspot where all the Latinos meet.
Yeah.
Could be a lot of, but so far no concrete plans, but it's absolute, because for that reason I said, right, so it's worthwhile for a Brazilian startup to come to Switzerland, because especially compared to Brazil, everything works here, right? So it's organized, everything on so forth. What they would need is really Brazilian culture is different, so they would need some support and help how to adapt to the Swiss culture, right? Ideally with some Swiss partners, and obviously the other way around as well. It's Switzerland is a B2B2C market, and to become a unicorn or something in that, you know, to really scale, you need to go to a bigger country. And Brazil is certainly an interesting one. What though is important to understand is you should not go as an early stage startup to Brazil, as a Swiss early stage startup, because you need to make money first in Switzerland, because it will take time in Brazil. So you need to be able to finance your operation in Brazil, or your business development in Brazil, with the money you make here.
Yeah. Are there any examples that you could share, or not really? Not yet.
No, with Brazil, I mean, there's a great example with Mexico. That's Sandipan and Sonic.
Sandipan. Yeah.
You know, the virtual ATM.
Yes.
And actually, that would be for me. I mean, that was
yeah.
Exactly. They're already in Mexico, so and I talked several times with Sandipan about, you know, going to Brazil. And that was before Pix, right? Because now one could say, oh, they have Pix, it's online payment, but it makes it even more interesting because you still need to have some ATMs, right? But that doesn't, I mean, ATMs, either you have a lot or you have none, right? But it doesn't make having an ATM as a bank, but only a few, it doesn't make sense, because if you still need cash, you need to have many ATMs. And that could be really actually even more interesting for Sonect in Brazil now with Pix. So that's certainly one, I don't know about the strategy or the current strategy, but we've discussed that, and that would be really one on the payment side. I know some startup, I forgot the name or don't remember the name, but some Swiss-based startups or with Swiss roots, they worked in the area. I mean, they had like they have products in the area of wealth management, and there were some other also startups. They tried to do some business development some years ago in Brazil, but it would not move on, right? So I think it's the most interesting one would be wealth management. Typically, it would be in the area of consolidation of portfolios of data. So that would be one, right? Because they want to the wealth managers, they want to have one view over all portfolios, right? So that would be, and it could also be interesting if you have like a digital bank here. Certainly, I mean, they have, I forgot, there's like more than 30-40 digital banks in Brazil, or even more, right? So that would also be something, if we had a digital bank here, beyond payment, then Brazil could be interesting. But I don't know of concrete cases now.
Yeah. So since you mentioned wealth management, obviously this is an area of interest naturally in Switzerland, and WealthTech is a sector that has several companies here in Switzerland. What are you excited about? What is happening? What has happened and what is happening in the WealthTech sector here in Switzerland that you like and you're excited about?
Well, I've been excited already for quite some time about tokenized assets, right? Or like crypto assets. I mean, I'm not typically I'm not talking about specifically cryptocurrencies, but about really tokenization of like shares, real assets, because I believe that that will be at least as big as when the first stock exchange and when the stock exchanges came up. I mean, that had a huge impact, right? Because it will really democratize the investment, especially in those times, how the economy develops. I believe it's really interesting to invest in smaller companies. And that has been, I have been excited about that for a long time. And now it's more and more moving in that direction. And we really can see that now it's happening. And here I'm not talking even so much about technology, but just about, because in the end, for digital assets, you need a market. And market and volume has nothing to do with technology, right? And there we have an amazing case. So it's called, they're called Stapleton. They so far are not even using tokenization, but they build a platform where you can, invest in smaller companies, like pre-IPO companies, like after VC, but before IPO. And they get the great issuers, and they get also the volume. I mean, the buyers. And you can trade on that platform, so you're also able to sell again. So I think that is an amazing thing, and I have no doubt, right? So that will be at least as big as stock exchanges, and I think I'm right. I'm convinced I'm right. Usually, I'm always a little bit too early. So all my predictions, they were often
but it's
right,
not a question of timing. I mean, of course, we're not talking, 20 or 50 years down the road. Really, what you are excited about is the tokenization. You're talking now of shares of equity, for example, of private companies. So we're talking about really transforming private markets that are huge, as we all know, in most economies, small businesses, medium businesses, what's traded on stock exchanges is really small compared to what exists. And we're not even going into debt instruments, private debt and so on.
Absolutely. And the other one would be, of course, AI. And because now it's getting concrete, right? And I'm very excited. I mean, it maybe was a little bit too much. Everybody talked about this chat GPT, but in the end, you know, it's the adoption, right? So it's about, because people don't change easily until chat GPT, for like business people, they could not understand, you know, there was, everything was AI, blah, 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 but you could not touch it, right? And that chat GPT thing, I think that will really help with a cultural change, right? And there it depends on which area, but there definitely, I'm convinced in the area of reporting, right? It's like a portfolio manager needs to report like quarterly or even more, explain why he bought this, why he bought that, you know, market condition, why the asset allocation changed, blah, 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 blah. That is, there's no reason why that should not be done by AI, right? That you can easily do it, and if you work with ChatGPT, you can see how it's done. And the other one would be in the area, of course, of investment. You know, will it generate alpha? Will it get a better performance with AI? You can analyze more data, maybe, maybe not, but it certainly will be done cheaper, right? And if you can do something cheaper, then you can provide it with less fees and costs to the client, and that will lead automatically to better performance. So
coincidentally, today on my weekly blog, I was covering the basics of algorithmic trading, and which are the areas that will, I believe, will see sooner rather than later the impact of these large language models. And you know, if you think of the strategies that are based on news and sentiment combined with maybe others, but are really trying to source alpha through that, obviously they're going to benefit because they'll be able to test models and back test at a pace that was impossible and uneconomical before, right? And
absolutely, exactly.
And use alternative data to empirically test and improve the algorithms that they are using, whether it's for better arbitrage, better opportunities of modeling and projecting and so on. So for me, that's clear. And also I see already experimentation in the compliance area. If we could train on large sets of regulations globally, you can imagine how much more efficient we're going to be in identifying, you know, contradictions or, you know, errors and with complex instruments in the private markets, like, you know, bonds and covenants. It's just amazing.
No doubt, absolutely, absolutely.
And the mindset shift, I think, is what you mentioned, is more important than the actual
absolutely. The whole innovation, that was the case, right? So it, you know, take the example. That's a very easy one. Takes the example of self-checkout with Migros and Coop. Remember, right? So people were queuing behind the cashier desk, and all these automatically the self-checkout things, they were like empty, right? And it took a year or more, and it was so logical. I mean, you have like a few things, of course, why would you queue? But people queued, right? And today you can see that the cashiers, the human cashier desks are empty, and people use the machine, and they queue a little bit with the machine, right?
Yes.
Simple. That's how we work.
Amazing. That's how the same what happened with the digitalization of, you know, payments during COVID. You know, people, the technologies existed before, you know, the contactless, the QR codes, everything, but then, you know, it happened like that. So Marc, is Switzerland really exporting, if you want, wealth tech innovation to other countries or not yet?
Not enough, I think. So I said, so like Singapore, definitely, and it maybe makes the most sense, right? So it's on one side, Singapore is a big competitor of Switzerland, but it's also, you know, the closest, right? But so far it's not, you know, because it's wealth management, or the Swiss wealth management approach. It's hard to measure it in numbers, right? So it's like this typical, I mean, Switzerland, why is Switzerland big in wealth management? It's this private banking approach. And that is not, those are not hard facts, right? It's just like how we deal with clients and so on and so forth. So that's maybe where we have a bit of challenge, but I've not seen so much. And also those countries, right? So they're not, I mean, I've been discussing that a lot with China, right? So they really need it. They need financial literacy. There's not enough knowledge there. And basically we have the knowledge, and China would need it, for instance, and to a certain extent also in Brazil. But then it's the cultural difference, and that is, and also, again, it's building, in the end, it's building trust, right? So take again the example of China. So China rather would work, Chinese wealthy people rather would work with a Chinese bank than with the UBS, and then even more extreme, working with a WealthTech, right? It's really a trust thing, and trust, you cannot force it, you need to build it, and that will take time on all, you know, on all levels, government, banking side, the fintech side, or WealthTech side.
Yeah. So overall, in fintech these days, before we close, what are you excited about, and how do you see the developments, you know, with these collaborations? Do you see further opportunities going forward? Give us a bit of a sentiment around that.
Yes, I mean, because now it's especially China, right? I mean, Brazil, you can already could have gone before, but you need to travel there. You need to meet people, and China just opened up for like foreigners just really recently, a few weeks ago, right? And there, it's of course we have the political tensions that make it a bit harder. But there, I think the setup is extremely interesting. So where I am excited about, that's a little bit personal, but in China, a good friend of mine who before worked for the Swiss government in Brazil, now is our consul general in Guangdong, Shenzhen, right? And he really is helping to push that to open this market, to connect us. And there I'm excited about, and that is, I think, where we really have a chance to push that collaboration. So that's my personal excitement about it. And apart from that, absolutely, it's what I said before, right? It's AI and tokenization of assets in general, the big picture.
Marc, before we close, I'm going to ask you a personal question that has nothing to do with fintech, but maybe with other technologies, if you want, that you're excited with, that have to do with physical and mental health. I know you are, what's it called? The cold, not a cold shower person. You're a cold swimmer.
Cold sea swimmer, yeah. It's cold sea swimmer.
Cold sea swimmer. So tell us about that technology.
Yeah, so I mean, it's in the end, you know, it has a lot of to do with our metabolism and our health system, and that's something, you know, I worked for some years even with Chinese in the area of, you know, stem cell treatment and such. So that only has a little bit to do with it, but you know, several aspects. So basically, I don't swim in the cold lake, but just go every morning into the cold lake and just stay there for like 10 minutes. And the thing is, like, if you do that, you get into a survival mode. So basically, you stop thinking, right? So your stress level goes up, and you cannot think because you're in the survival mode. So it's like my fast pace to meditation, because, you know, my brain is empty, right? And it's pushing your immune system. And I just got to say, right, I started that somewhere a little bit before COVID started. Or no, it was during COVID actually. So I never knowingly got COVID. And since then, since the past few years, or since the beginning of COVID, I was never ill. You know,
that's
nothing.
very interesting, because I didn't realize that you don't swim, move, so to speak. I thought that you swim then moved. I'm familiar with that, but I didn't know that this was you.
Yeah. No, it's more, you know, it's swimming, because then all your blood moves. Basically, you go in and you meditate, and you cannot meditate that well if you swim, right?
Of course.
And you also will not be able, if you swim, you will not be able to do it 10 minutes, right? So it's like meditation, heat up your body and so on and so forth. And I know mentally it just gives you a kick in the morning, because I do it in the morning, and then you get up, and then it's like, you already did the hard stuff, right? So what else can happen, right? So you were in the cold water, you took that challenge, you take it every day. So what other challenge could be during the day, which is harder? There's none. So you relax for the whole day.
That is amazing. Thank you very much, Marc, for
Thank you very much for having me.
Your insights and at the personal level and at the technology and all your passions. Thanks again.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. I'm very, very much looking forward to see you soon again in person.